Okay. Well, the section that we're reading from, reading, is from Krishna's childhood, of course, but there's a special age. He just turned 6. And when Krishna was he wasn't even 3.5, 3 years and 4 months. The elders of the community, now this is village life, so people get together and they make decisions together and they do things together. When he was just 3 years, 4 months, the elders of the community, headed by his father's brother, it's a nice story. There are 5 brothers, and the eldest was due to become the king by succession. That's the standard procedure. So the elder brother's name was Upananda. Upananda, when his father was turning the kingdom over to him, he, at the very same moment, accepted the kingdom and passed it on to his younger brother or middle brother, saying he's the one who's really qualified. Now that doesn't normally happen. But in Krishna's pastimes, nobody's envious. In the material world, everybody's envious. But he passed the kingdom on to Nanda. So Nanda and the elder Upananda got together when Krishna was just 3 years, 4 months, and decided, for protection of the children and for the well-being of the cows, because both are very important in village life, because their occupation wasn't just agriculture, it was particularly cow protection. They did agriculture also, but cow protection, big. 900,000 cows in Nanda Maharaj's herd of cows. So they moved. And they moved from one side of the river Jamuna, much further south, to the western side of the river Jamuna, much further north. And Krishna was playing, although he had already demonstrated the fact that he was omnipotent. He did things that children can't do. But they didn't see that way. They saw him as their beloved son, not just his parents, but the affection of all the householders, all the family people had more affection for Krishna than for their son. These are extraordinary people. They have affection for other children, but not more affection for one child more than their own child. And it was all like that because they're all pure devotees. Vrindavan is a very special place. So when Krishna got to Vrindavan, which means on the western side of the river, there's a Vrindavan forest. It's huge. It's one of 12 forests, but it's especially liked by Krishna. And it's mentioned specifically, as soon as he reached there were 3 things that he just was so attracted to. The forest, to the bank of the river, the Jamuna River. As we sang that song, Yamuna Tira, it means along the banks of the river Jamuna. Vanachari, the forest, enjoying activities with his dear brother Balaram. And Govardhan Hill. 3 things. And when he was just, think of somebody 3 years, 4 months, he was a little big for his age, but he was more than just big. He was the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and he had attraction for cows. So he asked his mother if he could herd cows. She said, do you see how big those cows are? No. Because he had already shown that he was like really curious, and he would get involved in anything, put his hand in fire, and play with the horns of the bulls, and he was very mischievous. So no. So he went to his father, and his father asked, "What did your mother say?" She said, "No." He said, "They're so big." But he was so attached to the cows. He finally relented and said, "All right, you can take care of the calves, but you have to come back for lunch." So they had a big festival because he's taking up the family occupation. And he just loved the calves. So first, before that, actually, when he went with his father, because he went out with his father, he was all the time with the cows. And wherever he would go, the cows would follow him because they were attached to him. And that's when it was decided, okay, you can take care of the calves. It's much safer. So for 1 year and 8 months, that's what he did. Every day. It wasn't like 5 days of the week. It was 7 days of the week, every day. And because these are pastimes where he's enjoying, and he's giving pleasure to others who are enjoying that he's enjoying because of love, and they would play all day long, and the calves would just follow along. They didn't have to herd them. The calves loved them, and they just tagged along. That's what they did. And sometimes they would play for such a long time, Mother Jasoda would have to go appeal to them to come back. And they were having so much time, they just didn't come, didn't come to take their meal. So she had to do tricky things sometimes to get them to take their meal. He loved the cows and loved the calves, and the calves loved him. So it was a big deal. When he graduated, when he was 5, he was given the opportunity now to take care of the cows. And cows, when they're fully mature, they're very large. And some have big horns. But it was, they saw his affinity for them and their affinity for him, so it was okay. And there's a lot of description of his physical features changed specifically. I mean, he's precocious, so he's manifesting everything. He was manifesting everything. He was crawling before most children. He was toddling before most children. He was walking before most children. And there's pastimes connected with interacting with all the other animals and all the other trees and creepers and people, and he's mixing with his beloved eternal devotees, who are all these trees and creepers and bushes and animals. And so we're hearing a description of the loving exchange. He's doing it in such a way that he's honoring his brother. But their physical features are bigger now. Their range of where they took the cows was much larger. The whole of Vrindavan, they went everywhere. No restrictions, although he's just 5. Now 6. So it's a stage where, the section that we're reading from is his interactions with the various forms of life in Vrindavan, and his appreciation for them, his appreciation for their service to Balaram, which means his service to him, and how luxuriant the creepers are, and how fortunate they are by being touched by Balaram's fingertips as he takes some flowers and some leaves for decorations and so on. The earth, the river. So if we If we listen with that view in mind, we're being taken directly into Krishna's pastimes by sound. At least for me, I've been practicing Krishna consciousness for a few years now. And just hearing these descriptions, it's absorbing. And it's, according to our learned acharyas, it's stimulations of love for Krishna, ecstatic love for Krishna. All of these descriptions are exactly that. I mean, it sounds like, hey, look at this place, take some pictures. But it's much more. It's a spiritual experience for the ear and the heart. So here's the verse. This is the third day we're discussing the same verse because our acharyas have a lot to say about it. It's Canto 10, Chapter 15, text number 8. Krishna is speaking to Balaram. He has his arm on his shoulder, pointing to the trees and the bees and the birds and the songs of the birds and the thises and the that's. So how fortunate is everyone. This earth has now become most fortunate because you have touched her grass and bushes with your feet, and her trees and creepers with your fingernails, and because you have graced her rivers, mountains, birds, and animals with your merciful glances. But above all, you have embraced the young cowherd women between your two arms, a favor hankered after by the goddess of fortune herself. Now, we discussed this yesterday, but these are 6-year-old boys. But Krishna is speaking of a pastime that will take place much, much, much later in their lives. That is, after they leave Vrindavan, they go to Mathura. After Mathura, they go to Dwaraka. After being in Dwaraka, Balaram tries to persuade Krishna to go back and relieve the hearts of the residents in Vrindavan that are feeling unequaled separation from him. Krishna doesn't go, so Balaram goes, and he spends months pacifying their hearts. So it's during that period of time Balaram also performed rasa dance with a different set of gopis than Krishna. So he's referring to a pastime that didn't happen yet. And so there's a little bit of discussion here now about the engagement that Krishna had with the gopis, and were the gopis, was Krishna, it's not elaborately discussed, but in the context of when they're in Mathura, so Krishna, when he was 12 years old, was taken from Vrindavan to Mathura by Akrura to take part in a festival. I mean, that was the cover. The plan was a murder plot to kill Krishna, 12-year-old boy. But instead, by Kamsa, with the wicked king. So instead of Krishna being killed, Kamsa was killed, and Krishna then released his mother and father from prison, and the father of Kamsa was reinstalled on the throne because he was dethroned and also imprisoned. And Krishna went to school because he hadn't been to school yet. He's 12 years old. He was 12 years old and he hadn't gone to school yet. Did you hear that? But he was taking care of cows. He was busy. So when he turned 12, commonly a young boy who's from a Kshatriya family, an administrator family, they receive their sacred thread at 12. There's a ceremony. They receive mantras, Gayatri mantra, etc. So Krishna had that done, and then he went to school, and he graduated school in 60 days. He learned everything that is to be taught in 60 days. He was a pretty smart kid, because he's omniscient. So then he went back to Mathura, And when he's in Mathura, his thoughts are with the residents of Vrindavan as much as their thoughts are with him. So he decides to send his dear cousin brother, Uddhava, to go meet the gopis and explain why he hasn't come back yet and his love for them and so forth and so on. And Uddhava is so moved by the residents of Vrindavan, and in particular, the kind of love, the intensity, the absorption of love that the young gopis have for Krishna, that he begins praising them right before them, and then later to himself. Later in this is Canto 5, Chapter 18. This is the section of the Bhagavatam that's dealing with Vedic cosmology. Materialistic women are described in these words in Srimad Bhagavatam 5:18-19. My dear Lord, you are certainly the fully independent master of all the senses. Therefore, all women who worship you by strictly following vows because they wish to acquire a husband to satisfy their senses are surely under illusion. They do not know that such a husband cannot actually give protection to them or their children, nor can he protect their wealth or duration of life, for he himself is dependent on time, fruitive results, and the modes of nature, which are all subordinate to you. That's the good husband. These words were spoken by Srimati Lakshmi Devi in the midst of Srimad Bhagavatam's descriptions of Kutmala Varsha. Kutmala Varsha is one of the areas. It's a detail. According to Vedic cosmology, the structure of the universe is depicted in the 5th canto, and there's lower, upper, and middle. The lower has 7 lower planetary systems. The upper has 7 planetary systems, makes 14 planetary systems, and the middle planetary system is where we are. And the middle planetary system has a shape, and it's shaped like a series of islands and oceans, 7 oceans and 7 circular islands. And the middle of those circular islands, it's a little detail, is where we are. And where we are, there's 9 varshas, and one of those is the one that's mentioned here. Varsha means like a tract of land. So the Earth planet within this middle planetary system is Bharat Varsha. Bharat Varsha. Not just, India, but the planet. Bharat Varsha was known in the Vedic time. And then there's another Varsha named Kutmala Varsha. Then it makes reference to Uddhava when he is visiting the gopis. Uddhava says, Ima striyo vyabhichari dushta Krishne kva paramatmani. Means, what is the status of women who are averse to Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead? The meaning would then be, there is a great difference between such women and the gopis. Then the word Rudha Bhava may be interpreted to mean not even the smallest fragment of the exalted spiritual love that is the crushed jewel of all goals of life is not seen in such women. That exalted spiritual love is present only in the devotees who are filled with love for the Lord. Only the devotees love the Lord. This is confirmed by the passage beginning with Nanu. What more can be said? So he's, this is one of our commentators taking this verse that we just read and drilling down on it, specifically that section that says, Balaram, how much mercy you're giving to the creepers and the bushes and the earth and the other forms of life. What to speak of the fortune of the cowherd damsels who you very kindly embraced in your arms, which even the goddess of fortune Lakshmi hankers for. So he's spending time with that little section of the verse. Uddhava again declares, when Lord Sri Krishna was dancing with the gopis in Rasa Leela, the gopis were embraced by the arms of the Lord. This transcendental favor was never bestowed upon the goddess of fortune or other consorts in the spiritual world. Indeed, never was such a thing even imagined by the most beautiful girls in the heavenly planets whose bodily luster and aroma resemble a lotus flower. And what to speak of worldly women who are very beautiful according to mere material estimation. He's the emphasis on what mercy was being given to those cowherd girls who were engaged in Rasa Leela dance with Krishna. This verse then continued, Svar Yoshitam Nalini Gandha Rucham, which means, even if the goddess of fortune cannot attain that happiness, then the women of Swargaloka, whose limbs are like golden lotus flowers and who do not even reside in Vaikuntha, certainly cannot attain it. Then the words Kuto Nya, which means other women who are far away from them, certainly cannot attain it. That is the meaning. Then one may ask, are there any women who are not bereft of this happiness? The answer is given in the verse and the passage beginning the word rasa. When Lord Krishna was dancing with the gopis in the Rasa Leela, the gopis were embraced by the arms of the Lord. Here the word asya means of the form of Lord Krishna, the Prince of Braja. That goddess Lakshmi yearns to attain the touch of Lord Krishna is also confirmed by these words. Bhagavatam 10:16-36. O Lord, we do not know. This is the Kaliya serpent. You familiar with the Kaliya serpent? No? Kaliya? The snake that was living in a lake and it was poisonous and everything was... So after Kaliya, Krishna was dancing on the hoods of Kaliya, the wives of the Kaliya serpent came forward and offered prayers. O Lord, we do not know how the serpent Kaliya has attained this great opportunity, being touched by the dust of your lotus feet. For this end, the goddess of fortune performed austerities for centuries, giving up all other desires and taking austere vows. Goddess Lakshmi did not only yearn to attain the love the gopis felt in separation from Lord Krishna, she also yearned to attain the love they felt when they directly enjoyed pastimes with him. What persons like myself can describe that love? In Srimad Bhagavatam, again it's Uddhava, when in the rasa dance, Lord Krishna embraced the gopis' necks, the gopis felt all their desires were fulfilled. This means the desires the gopis had, long kept hidden in their hearts, was now openly attained. That goddess Lakshmi yearned to attain the gopis' good fortune is also confirmed in these words of Srimad Bhagavatam, this verse that we just read. You have embraced the young cowherd women between your two arms, a favor hankered after by the goddess of fortune herself. Now, Krishna speaking to Balaram, and the way this text is reading is It's Uddhava speaking about Krishna. So they're interchangeable because they had two sets of gopis and certainly different ages, but they're lords. In Srimad Bhagavatam 10:47-60, there's lots of this verse is being referred to again and again, so it's an important verse. The word Vraja, Sundari Nam, of the beautiful girls of Vraja, shows that the gopis are the most beautiful of all girls. That the devotees attain all exalted qualities is confirmed by these words in Srimad Bhagavatam. Again, back to the 5th canto Bhagavatam, same section. All the demigods and their exalted qualities, such as religion, knowledge, and renunciation, become manifest in the body of one who has developed unalloyed devotion for the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Vasudeva. Spiritual love, where the devotee loves the Lord as a beloved, is the crest jewel of all kinds of spiritual love. Here, two levels of love, as manifested by the goddess Lakshmi and by the gopis, are revealed. That this kind of spiritual love for the Lord is the most exalted is not refuted by the following words spoken by the Lord to Uddhava in the 11th canto Bhagavatam. In the morning we're reading from the 11th canto Bhagavatam. We're not at chapter 14 yet, but in chapter 14 he says, "My dear Uddhava, neither Brahma, Lord Shiva, nor Sankarshan, the goddess of fortune, nor in my own self are as dear to me as you are." Now the emphasis in the whole verse that we're discussing from chapter 15, text 8, is the love that Krishna feels for his devotees. And his devotees include the bushes and the creepers and the birds and the bees and the trees and the thises and the that's and the deer and he loves them. And by his expressing that love for them, their love for him is expanding. Naturally so. When one hears the kind of love one feels for another, their love is stimulated and stirred, and that's Vrindavan. So out of all the different creatures, because it was mentioned in from the previous verses, there's an intensity of love, and the intensity of love is unequaled when it comes to the gopis. And some of the explanations of why that is being said is being explained. Krishna is giving a favor to the gopis that he didn't give to anyone. Yet he's saying in this 11th canto verse that my love for you, Uddhava, and it's so in comparison to his love for Brahma, Shiva, and Lord Sankarshan. Lord Sankarshan is his expansion, and the goddess of fortune. He has more feelings of affection. He holds more dear to him, Uddhava, than all these others. So and more dear than Uddhava is the residents of Vrindavan. It's not just like a lawyer building a case. It's illumination of the fact that the associates of Krishna in Vrindavan are very fortunate. And they're fortunate because having attained such kind of love. In 3 chapters earlier, when Shukadeva Goswami is narrating what the cowherd boys do with Krishna every day, he stops in the middle of the narration and just goes ecstatic and said, what good fortune have these boys, what has qualified them to have this good fortune? Because there are yogis that see him as Paramatma, and the different, and years and lifetimes of activities they undergo. And these cowherd boys, they're playing with him, wrestling with him, rolling on the ground with him, just having fun together. What have they done to achieve this? the phrase that's used is krita, punya, punja, lifetimes of pious activities. But it's not just material piety, it's a spiritual attainment. And similar discussion in earlier chapters, 2 chapters before that, is the kind of love that Mother Jasoda has for Krishna, the kind of love that Nanda and Jasoda have for Krishna, both separately and together. It's unbelievable. How did they achieve that? Maharaj Pariksit asked Sukadeva Goswami, how did they achieve that? They, of course, there are different things that are said, but they're just eternally situated like that. They didn't do something to get something. They're eternally, and these associates of Krishna are, some join Krishna's pastimes, and others are eternal associates of Krishna when he manifests his pastimes. As he manifests himself and his pastimes, they manifest with him. When his pastimes are withdrawn, they're withdrawn into their unmanifest stage, eternally enjoying pastimes with Krishna in an unmanifest stage. It's a very wonderful mystery. But the point is that Krishna has great love and holds very dear the residents of Vrindavan and those who are close to the residents of Vrindavan, especially, even in comparison to Brahmashiva, Sankarshan, and the goddess of fortune herself. These words are only intended to praise devotional service and the devotees in a general way. They do not mean that Uddhava is in a position superior to Goddess Lakshmi and the other devotees who consider the Lord their beloved, because the gopis love Lord Krishna, the original form of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Their position is most exalted. Okay, here's another reference to this verse, text 8 from chapter 15, found in the Kaliya chapter 16. O Lord, we do not know how the serpent Kaliya has attained this great opportunity of being touched by the dust from your lotus feet. For this end, the goddess of fortune performed austerities for centuries, giving up all other desires and taking austere vows. That's the very next chapter. He's still like 6 years old when that pastime took place. Commentary. We do not understand. This is paraphrasing the wives of the Kaliya serpent. What was the cause of Kaliya, a great offender, getting this result, the qualification to touch the dust of your feet? Why? Do they not know? Lakshmi, who performed austerities to please him, having the most delicate form, desiring qualification to touch Krishna's feet, giving up the enjoyment of relationship with the highest husband, Narayana, took great vows and performed austerities for a long time, but she did not attain qualification. If she attained qualification, the verse would not say, we do not know how Kaliya attained qualification to touch the dust of your feet. That is a reasonable doubt. For this reason they exclaim, Oh, Lord, with astonishing greatness, Lakshmi, the consort of the Lord of Vaikuntha, as an associate of Krishna, did not become a cowherd woman, but rather took the form of a lion on his chest. This is the meaning of what Krishna previously said in this evening's verse. But above all, you have embraced the young cowherd woman between your two arms, a favor hankered after by the goddess of fortune herself. She could only take the form of a fine golden line on the left side of his chest, since, as a woman, she already worshipped Narayana as her husband. Her austerity or worship to attain Krishna was more intense. It is suitable that she desired Krishna since she knew Krishna was none different from Narayana and had special greed because of Krishna's beauty, though Lakshmi is a consort of the Lord, as a consort of the Lord, is not different from the gopis. She had a desire for being an intense lover. The devotees have a different identity in different manifestations of the Lord. For instance, although Lakshmi is always in association with Narayana, Sita, who is also not different from Lakshmi, feels separation from Ram. But by her austerities, Lakshmi did not attain Krishna during 3 yugas, since she did not have the intense, exclusive love displayed in the gopis. Though one may say the cause of Kaliya's qualification was association with his devotee wives, and living in the Jamuna within Vrindavan, living in the Jamuna is not raised as a qualification because he offended the river, and is also included in the result touching of Krishna's lotus feet. Now, our acharyas are relishing with reference to statements from Scripture. They're relishing Krishna's love. And the objects or the persons who are the recipients of Krishna's love. And it is astonishing that Kaliya received the kind of mercy that Kaliya received when others don't receive it. So what entitled him? But those that do receive it, they're recipients of such great fortune. There's a reference elsewhere that Kali, although he was a bad person, really bad person, very envious person, in the form of a poisonous snake, he achieved eternal residence in Krishna Loka, not as a poisonous snake, but it's described elsewhere. So sometimes there's not like, it's a causeless kind of exchange. Causeless means normally this prompts that. There's a cause and an effect. And sometimes Krishna just bestows causeless mercy. As it seems that's what happened with Kaliya. But others didn't receive the same. Now here's another reference in the later section of the 10th canto. This is the Rasa dance section. Krishna and Balaram wore flower garlands and spotless garments. No, this is the chapter just after that. And their limbs were beautifully decorated and anointed. The women sang their glories in a charming way, bound to them by affection. This is after the Rasa dance, and the next day Krishna is going out with the cows again. And the gopis are standing at the edge of Vrindavan watching Krishna enter the forest, playing upon his flute, notifying all the forest animals and entities that here I come. And the gopis are standing at the edge of Vrindavan watching them enter the forest, feeling what they're feeling and seeing what they're seeing, and totally absorbed in Krishna. This pastime is described in 3 verses. The 2, Krishna Balaram, were described by the gopis using songs suitable for Hodika or holy, attractive with joyful singing and arrangements, since they were bound by affection to the 2 boys. Balaram had separate gopis during this pastime. This has been indicated previously. It will be stated in verse 24 that hearing the song, the gopis fainted. The 2 sang songs, and the 2 separate groups of gopis fainted. However, in describing the pastime, because of the crowds on that occasion, the descriptions of the two boys' separate pastimes are merged together, though the two actually had separate pastimes. Yeah. So here's another description of Balaram going to Vrindavan from Dwarka. Much later, chapter 65. So Krishna and Balaram are in Dwarka. They've been there for some time. Balaram is encouraging Krishna to go to Vrindavan to pacify the Brajavasis. They don't go. Balaram goes. Balaram resided there for 2 months, the months of Madhu and Madhava, and during the nights he gave his cowherd girlfriends pleasure. According to the principle enunciated by the word ta in the previous verse, those gopis were dedicated to Krishna alone. The gopis mentioned in the present verse were other gopis dedicated only to Balaram. The gopis referred to by the word ta in the previous verse does not refer to the gopis mentioned in this verse because of the reasons previously mentioned. If they were, it would have created a scandal in Dwarka. What more need to be said? Now the present pastime is being explained. Having completely consoled Krishna's dear gopis, he enjoyed with other gopis of Balaram's group about whom Krishna joked during his Poganda period. That's chapter 65 is referring back to something that's in chapter 15. You have embraced the young cowherd women between your two arms. These gopis mingled with Krishna's gopis during the events leading to the killing of Shankachuta and the holy ka pastimes. So that killing of Shankachuta, you familiar with that? A little bit? Vaguely. So Kamsa had heard, he sent some spies. Keshi was one of them. And, what's the scoop? So Keshi came back and said, although he's very young, he's very powerful, and he has young gopis, and I think you should be the enjoyer of those young gopis, not him. So something like Ravana hearing about Sita. And so he sent a minister named Shankachuta to bring the gopis to him. So Shankachuta came. He had a big jewel, a conch-shaped jewel on his turban. And Krishna and Balaram, it was holy. And they're young. And they're doing what young people do when there's holy. They were singing songs, playing musical instruments, and having holy ka or holy dance. And right in the middle, he just completely ignored Krishna and Balaram and started shooing the gopis away to take them to Kamsa. And the gopis cried, and Krishna sprang into action. That's what's being referred to. But there they were, there's Krishna, there's Balaram, and they're dancing with different sets of gopis for the holy festival. Previously, they maintained their chastity by not association with him. With the consent of Krishna, by his request, Balaram pacified his own gopis for 2 months. The word cha indicates a different subject. It is said in verse 1 that he went to Braja desiring to see his friends. That was his principal aim. Secondarily, he enjoyed with his own gopis. He did this at night in a most secret way, far away on the bank of the river Jamuna, for he was suitable for enjoying, and he was Bhagavan. Thus he enjoyed with many gopis. And Sridhar Swami comments, the gopis who enjoyed conjugal affairs with Lord Balaram during his visit to Gokula had not taken part in Krishna's rasa dance, being too young at that time. Srila Jiva Goswami confirms this statement by quoting a phrase from the Bhagavatam, this verse, which indicates that there are particular gopis who acted as Balaram's girlfriends. Furthermore, Jiva Goswami states that during the holy festival celebrated when Krishna killed Shankachuta, the gopis Lord Balaram enjoyed with were different from the ones Lord Krishna enjoyed with. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti agrees with this explanation. Anyway, there's only a little bit left. It's saying basically the same thing. Here's in Chaitanya Charitamrita, it is stated, the first manifestation of the Vaibhav feature of Krishna is Sri Balaramji. Sri Balaram and Krishna have different bodily colors, but otherwise, Sri Balaram is equal to Krishna in all respects. Lord Krishna glorifies Balaram, who is not different from himself in Srimad Bhagavatam, in this verse. So, a few things. Besides the main thing. The main thing is Krishna's reciprocation of love with these residents of Vrindavan, who he's appreciating their love for him, and he's reciprocating with them, and it sends them into states of ecstatic jubilation, spiritual joy. But he's doing so by not referring to their love for him, he's referring to their love for Balaram. And so then the connection between Balaram and Krishna is what we just read. It's a technical term, Vaibhav, expansion, but he's not different than Krishna in all respects except color. Now Krishna can do anything, so one of the things of anything, he can expand himself. As in Rasa dance, he expanded himself into so many Krishnas. In Dwaraka, he expanded himself into so many Krishnas, and simultaneously was with each of the queens, simultaneously in different palaces. And then in the morning when he would go to the assembly hall, all those different Krishnas would merge into one Krishna. He'd go into the assembly hall, and he left the assembly hall and expanded to so many Krishnas and went back to his homes and palaces. So Krishna can expand himself. There's so many different ways by which Krishna can expand himself. There's a really nice description towards the very end of the 10th canto when Krishna is considering one of his dear devotees who he didn't visit yet, and is the king of Mithila. So he bears the same title as Janaka, because kings following Janaka bear the title Janaka. Bahulashva was his name. So he wanted to go visit King Bahulashva. So when he went on the way, he met many, many, many other kings and gave his association to the many, many other kings. But the mission was this very special devotee, Bahulashva. And when he got to Bahulashva's kingdom, there was a very special devotee Brahmana, and they both requested Krishna to come to have a meal at their home. So that gets sometimes awkward. What are you going to do? But for Krishna, it's not a problem. He expanded himself into Krishna's. He went to Bahulashva's home and went to the Brahman's home, Shrutadev, and they didn't know the difference. He's showing kindness to me, or he's showing kindness to me. Didn't think like, wow, he just expanded himself into two Krishnas. That's part of the influence of the pastime potency or yogamaya potency, that they're receiving Krishna's affection in a ways that's exactly customized for their personality and their love for him. But they don't recognize that he's simultaneously doing something quite similar but different with others at the same time. The gopis didn't realize that Krishna was dancing in so many forms because they're simple village girls. They didn't understand Krishna's divinity. That would have spoiled the whole thing. But he did. He expanded himself in such a way they couldn't even detect it. So one of his expansions is Balaram, and it's the same, except color. And the other is that Balaram has this mood that he likes to serve Krishna, although he's the elder brother. And in Vedic culture, the elder brother is served by the younger brother. Although it was just a short number of days difference. But like in Ram's pastimes, the 4 brothers that were born, Krishna was just 1 day older. And then the others were 1 day further away, according to Ramayana calculations. But Ram's the elder brother. And for cultured people, it's a big deal. And they're totally devoted to Ram, all the brothers. So it's a role reversal. In this case, Balaram is the elder brother, but he likes to serve Krishna. And in so many, many, many ways, he likes to serve Krishna. And Krishna likes to serve him. And that's the nature. And one other thing, it's a nice detail. The Acharyas described when they were little, before the 6-year-old age, they were just like equals. They played, they did everything, they crawled together, they stole butter together, they did everything together, just like friends, equals. And this Poganda age begins, and it starts where the older brother, younger brother role starts to become manifest. And this is the beginning. He's got his arm on Balaram and gesturing at all the living entities and saying, they're being honored by your glance and by your touch and by your feet, and they're praising you, and they're offering their fruits and flowers, bowing down before you. The bees are singing your praises just like great sages, and so forth. It's the beginning of the older brother, younger brother, because the relationships that Krishna enjoys is with variety. And with his variety, it gives opportunity for service for everyone else in the fullness of variety. But it's the abode of loving exchange, loving service. And that's the very special qualification of all the residents of Vrindavan. And those who are sadhakas, like us, practicing devotees, there's an aspiration, like besides wow. It's the aspiration is to attain residence in the eternal spiritual realm, because the pastimes of Krishna manifest in this world, and there's an eternal spiritual realm where the pastimes of Krishna are eternally being conducted. And there's an aspiration upon completion of this body, this lifetime, to attain the spiritual eternal realm, which Krishna discusses in Bhagavad Gita. Purnarjanma na. No more birth. And no more birth means the soul goes to the place where there's eternal pastimes with Krishna. So it's of great interest to those who are developing love of God to understand, what does he do? What's it like there? And there isn't literature that has this kind of description. His form, his qualities, his abode, his associates, their loving exchanges, the sights, the sounds, the smells, everything. So that's why it's stimulations for ecstatic love, to aspire to attain that and appreciate the kind of love and the kind of dearness that Krishna holds such persons. Okay, so let's see if there's some discussion. A little different than a Bhagavad Gita class. Chapter 15, Canto 10.
Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj. I heard somewhere you read that Goddess Lakshmi did not achieve that fortune for 3 yugas. So I'm just a little confused. Was there like a pastime where Goddess Lakshmi does achieve?
If I've understood your question correctly, is there somewhere where it details what was that austerity and then the duration and how did the whole thing go on? That's your question? Not exactly.
No. Somewhere when you were reading the Acharya's commentary,
it mentioned 3 yugas.
3 yugas. So that's what made me like a little confused.
Now, what's the question specifically? If that's not it, where is this described more completely? Is not what you're asking.
I've never heard like.
I never did either.
Okay, so that's what I'm asking. Thank you, Maharaj.
It says, for a long time, I've heard for a long time, and it says here twice, for centuries, and then it says 3 yugas. And a century is like 100 years. And for, 3 centuries, or for centuries, plural, at least 2. And then there's 3 yugas. So I don't know. I'm just reading. I don't know any more elaborate explanation of where she was, what she did, what those austerities were, the actual duration of time. There must be some reference that I'm unaware of, because when Lord Chaitanya had his discussion with the chief priest in Sri Rangam on this topic, it was something they both knew. And that something is Goddess Lakshmi underwent austerities in order to enter into the rasa dance, but it didn't work. She wasn't allowed in the rasa dance. So where it's described and for what the duration is it this, that, or the other? I don't know that reference.
I heard you other day also speaking about mercy.
About mercy?
Yes. The Kalyagna got the mercy. What's the definition of mercy for us? How does it feel? How does it look like?
The essence is one thing, and how does it look like depends on, the particulars. The person, the time, place, circumstance. But the mercy in principle is the covering of forgetfulness, and everything that goes with forgetfulness is removed. And then in its place, the reality with a capital R is disclosed. And a lot depends upon the candidate of mercy, their eligibility, and their particular hankering, asha, or desire. I'm thinking of one particular, because it came up in some discussions recently. When the Nanda Maharaj was observing Ekadasi, and the next morning is Dwadasi, and it was a particular Ekadasi and Dwadasi where the lunar calculation and the solar calculation were different. That is to say, normally the night ends when the sun rises. So the Dwadasi by solar is when the sun rises. However, the lunar calendar is not when the sun rises. It's when the moon moves through a particular nakshatra from one day to the next day. So he had calculated correctly, or the Brahmins guiding him had calculated correctly, it was time to break the Ekadasi. So to break the Ekadasi, he was going to first take his sacred bath in the Jamuna. So at a proper time, by lunar calculation, the sun hadn't come up yet, but he's taking his bath in the river Jamuna. And there were elders that were of Vrindavan that were with him. But the agent of Varuna didn't have the right calculation. He thought he's violating a principle, taking his bath in the Jamuna before the sunrise. So he arrested him, took him to the abode of Varuna. And that's a different, there's some tunnel or something, so he could get to that place. So Krishna was called to help. So Krishna went to the abode of Varuna. And Nanda Maharaj watched what Varuna did. So it's two main things. There's opulence, heavenly opulence like nothing Nanda Maharaj had ever experienced. The abode of Varuna is extremely, extremely heavenly opulent. And the second is Varuna got down from his throne and began worshipping Krishna with paraphernalia for worship, demigod standard worship. And Nanda saw both. Krishna requested, I want my father to come with me back to Vrindavan. And, that was arranged. So Krishna went back to Vrindavan. Nanda's now restored with the residents of Vrindavan, and he's telling the story. This is what I saw. This is what I experienced. And they go, wow, who is this boy? Maybe this, maybe that, maybe the other thing. And then they conclude amongst themselves, well, if he's God, maybe he'll very kindly show us his eternal spiritual abode. They just thought it. They didn't go to Krishna and say it. But Krishna was omniscient, so he knew. They want this mercy. This is your question. They want to see. So I'll show them. No, they were already in the spiritual world. But they were thinking that they're not in the spiritual world because they're humble and, simple village people. And so he took them to the same place that later he took Akrura to, dipped them in the water, lifted them up, and then showed them the spiritual sky and the spiritual realm. And he was there and they were there. And Krishna was being praised by the personified Vedas, and they were astonished. So that's a kind of mercy. Now your question was, what does it look like? What is mercy for us? Well, it's going to be different we're not necessarily qualified like that. But it a lot depends on two things, our qualification for receiving. So mercy may come in the form of fill in the blank. But what it does is it removes the covering and it brings us closer to reality. That's the essence of mercy. And a particular form has some bearing on our desire. Supposing, for example, someone has an idea that achieving heaven, that's mercy. Or achieving opulence like heaven in this world, that's mercy. So one who does many, somethings, pious somethings, they may get that kind of mercy, but that's not full mercy. Getting elevation to heaven is not mercy compared to this other kind of mercy. Or getting liberation is not mercy compared to eternal residence in the spiritual realm with loving service. So mercy will come in different forms according to qualification and according to aspiration. And we're often our calculation of mercy is with the yardsticks of material well-being. And that's okay. That's a form of mercy too. It's limited and temporary. So as consciousness becomes elevated, then the calculation of what is mercy is going to change. And what one is eligible to receive, and then what one does receive is going to be a little different. But a lot of that is a consideration of consciousness, and a lot of consciousness has everything to do with our association. An association through sound, just like what we're reading. It's sound. And by association with sound of the Bhagavatam and the commentators that understand what the greatest mercy is, are helping to draw our attention to the greatest mercy. Or stimulate our ecstatic love for Krishna. That's the greatest mercy. And the gopis have it. Amongst the gopis, amongst the cowherd boys, amongst the elders, amongst all the residents of Vrindavan of different forms and so forth, there's some that are eternal, and there are some that are participating from the worldly plane, taking birth in Vrindavan along with the residents of Vrindavan and being trained by the eternal associates in the ways of loving service to Krishna in Vrindavan. It's a one-way ticket. Anything else?
Hare Krishna. I wanted to know how Balram's gopis are different than Krishna's gopis. Won't they aspire to become Krishna's gopis? So how? What's the difference? Why do they stop there, or is it equal?
Yeah,
Two
it's equal.
forms.
In the spiritual realm, there's no envy or competition, or there's no material envy and no material competition. They're as satisfied being gopis engaged in rasa dance with Krishna as the gopis who are engaged in rasa dance with Krishna with Balaram as with Krishna. I got language mixed up, but you understand. They're perfectly content. Now, if the heart's orientation is like this, then Krishna will reciprocate with this. If the heart's orientation is that, Krishna will reciprocate with that. The position is according to the heart's orientation, so they're not dissatisfied, or I'm in a lesser position and someone's in a more fortunate position. It's not like that. It's just the envy is, material competition is not there. It's a different place. Here it is. There it isn't. It's like amongst the the cowherd boys. There's different relationships, and whatever that relationship is their relationship. There, it's not like I'm stuck. I can't dynamically move to another relationship. They're at their eternal position, and they're very happy in their eternal position. But there are degrees of intimacy as well. Sridham is one of the very special. There's different ones. Subal, one of Krishna's cowherd boyfriends, Subal even looks like Krishna. So he has a special role in Krishna's pastimes, where he sometimes goes to the home of Radharani. He just looks like Krishna. And it's like, it's very interesting. Yeah, excuse me. He has a complexion like Radharani. He has a complexion like Radharani. Here's a nice pastime. Krishna was very much desiring to be with Radha, and Radha was very much desiring to be with Krishna, but Radha's mother-in-law, Jatila, was preventing it. And Krishna was in anxiety. So Vrinda Devi saw Krishna was in anxiety. So she suggested, send Subal. Send Subal saying to Jatila, what if my calves strayed away? I'm looking for my calf. So I have, I was told the calf is inside your house. Have you heard this story? It's a nice story. So Jatila was, well, you better hurry because, you got to take care of the calf, and I don't want any monkey business. I know you and Krishna. So he went inside and told the pastime, or told the little drama that Vrinda Devi had suggested. So they changed clothes. Radharani came out dressed like Subal, but she was carrying a calf in her arms across her chest. And she said, oh, I found the calf, and off she went to go meet with Krishna. And meanwhile, it's Subal inside dressed like Radharani, and then Radharani came back and they changed clothes again. So it's a celebrated pastime where Subal gets to do things because of his intimate relationship with Krishna and he having a complexion like Radharani. So he does things like that sometimes. And there's no envy. Very unique. Back there, you have something?
No.
Mom?
Yeah, I've been reading about the expansions of Krishna or the pastimes with gopis. But today what struck me was, like, if we are doing our rounds or we are meditating, we discuss our experiences. And I don't know, with your advanced stage or Mataji stage, you can see Krishna personally, but we have our own connections. Can we count them as expansions because of Krishna?
Your connections as expansions of Krishna?
No, I mean, when I do my rounds or when I meditate, I have a connection
Okay.
with Krishna. He has his own. We keep on discussing. But this thought never came to me that I'm seeing Krishna, but he's also seeing Krishna at the same time. And, so many devotees are with Krishna at the same time. Can we call them as his expansions in this Kali Yuga again?
Well, you can certainly call it mercy. You can certainly call it mercy. Now, if you go so far as to call it expansion of his mercy, I guess you could say that. And if his mercy is non-different than him, but Radha is the merciful pleasure potency of Krishna. So, that Krishna and Radha are touching your lives differently and personally. Yes, you can say that. Expansions of Krishna, in that sense, yes. It is the mercy, the expansions of his mercy. Yes. Bhakti is Bhakti Devi is an expansion of Radharani. But a real test of Bhakti Devi, is this really Bhakti Devi or something else, is service. When there's real love, it's not just something I feel, it's something I do. When the heart is moved, that's the exhibition of love. You do some service that's, extended in a loving manner. Rishikena Rishikesha Sevanam. Bhaktir Uchate. So let's see what happens when you take your hand out of your bead bag and you're doing your other duties in the kitchen and in the house and with your kids, and there's love for Krishna there touching. Then it's, the more that alignment is there, the more it's more mercy. It's not to say the other is not mercy, but it's more mercy when it comes out in the form of loving service in the practical activities of the day. Or in the words of Bhagavad Gita, Mama Nusmara Yujyacha. Always think of Krishna, and you do your prescribed duties at the same time while you're thinking of Krishna. Not two separate. Think of Krishna, okay. Now go do my duties, and I don't think of Krishna. It's both. That's being touched by mercy. Anyone else? Do we have anything online?
There's one question.
Okay.
This is from Atulya. Since Lord Balaram is an eternal associate of Krishna
Yeah.
and almost non-different than Krishna,
Yes.
is Lord Balaram also Lakshmana and Lord Nityananda Vishnu Tattvas?
Yes. 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 Okay. You have something? Okay. I guess that's it, huh? You usually have something very delightful to add to our discussions. Nothing this evening. Okay. Okay. Okay, fine. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.